Have you ever thought samurais were always smart in battle? You might be surprised by some of the strategies they actually used. Get ready to explore the most unexpected, and yes, dumbest strategies that samurais relied on during their fights. Imagine this. You're in a fierce battle, the enemy is charging toward you, and you feel like a superhero in your shiny armor. But what if I told you that sometimes being too protected can actually backfire? Yes, you heard that right. Many samurais wore heavy armor for protection, believing it would make them invincible. This armor was often adorned with intricate designs, symbolizing their status and honor. But there's a strange fact for you. Some samurais could weigh up to 200 pounds in armor. Now, just picture trying to run in that. The weight slowed them down and made them less agile on the battlefield. As they trudged into battle, their opponents could outmaneuver them with ease. One might think that armor equals safety, but what if I told you this very protection became a hindrance? It's hard to defend against a quick strike when you can't even turn your head. You might start to wonder, was it really worth it to sacrifice speed for protection? In this section, let's dive deeper into the dilemma of heavy armor. Imagine a samurai named Hiroshi, who charged into battle with pride, his armor gleaming under the sun. His enemies laughed as they easily dodged his slow swings. This isn't just a hypothetical. It happened. In fact, historical accounts suggest that during the famous Battle of Sekigahara, some samurai struggled to keep pace due to their cumbersome gear. As we explore this, consider the irony. These warriors were revered for their bravery, yet the very thing that was supposed to protect them sometimes led to their downfall. If they had lightened their load or adapted their armor, perhaps their battles would have had a different outcome. Now, here's something to think about. What if they could have trained to be quicker and more agile, instead of relying solely on heavy armor? This thought may spark some questions. How often do we hold on to things that weigh us down in our own lives? Are we so focused on protecting ourselves that we forget to adapt and move with agility? Just when you thought we've uncovered the entire story, there's a twist. Imagine the absurdity. Some samurai even adorned their armor with flashy decorations to intimidate their enemies. Picture warriors covered in bells and ribbons clanking as they walked. You can almost hear their foes chuckling. This is what we're afraid of. The reliance on heavy armor coupled with unnecessary adornments became a peculiar blend of fashion and function that sometimes confused allies and enemies alike. And let's not forget about the psychological aspect. The weight of their armor didn't just affect their physical capabilities, it also burdened their minds. With all that gear, they could be preoccupied with how they looked, rather than focusing on strategy or the fight ahead. The desire to appear strong and invincible could lead to a blind spot in tactical awareness. So what can we learn from this? Well, it's not just about being protected, but being prepared and adaptable. Just as the samurais could have benefited from lighter armor, we too should consider the things in our lives that might be holding us back, be it a heavy workload, toxic relationships, or outdated beliefs. In conclusion, while samurais are often celebrated for their valor, the irony lies in how sometimes their very strategies, like the charge of the heavy armor, highlighted their vulnerabilities. The next time you think of warriors clad in armor, remember the lesson. Sometimes less is more. It's not just about how protected you feel, it's about how well you can adapt and move. Now, as we move on to the next section, we'll delve into another fascinating yet baffling strategy, the Ritual of Seppuku. Stay tuned, because the code of honor surrounding this practice may shock you as we uncover how it sometimes led to unnecessary losses in battle. Did you know that samurais adhered to a strict code of honor that sometimes led them down a dark path? One of the most intriguing and tragic aspects of this code was seppuku, or ritual suicide, which was often seen as an honorable way to exit life rather than face defeat. Imagine facing such immense pressure that the thought of surrendering becomes worse than death itself. This is the complex world of samurai honor, where failure could mean not just loss in battle, but the loss of everything they stood for. Now let's dive into the heart of this topic. Seppuku was not merely a personal choice. It was steeped in tradition and societal expectations. Many samurais believed that by taking their own life, they preserved their honor and spared their family the disgrace of defeat. It's almost mind-boggling, right? In some cases, they even saw it as a noble duty. But let's pause for a moment. Have you ever considered the toll this belief took on the lives of these warriors? As we explore the intricacies of seppuku, consider this. When samurais chose this path, they often left behind families and comrades who had to grapple with the aftermath. Picture a battlefield littered with the fallen, where the surviving samurais faced not only physical challenges, but an emotional and ethical dilemma as well. The weight of such decisions could crush a spirit, yet it was a reality they lived with daily. Strange fact, some samurais would go so far as to celebrate their impending death through elaborate rituals, sometimes involving poetry or the recitation of their achievements. This isn't just morbid, it highlights the culture of honor that permeated their lives. It's a bit like throwing a farewell party before jumping off a cliff, but it begs the question, could this hyper-focus on honor lead to decisions that ultimately harmed more than they helped? One of the most controversial aspects of seppuku is its tragic nature. Many historians argue that this ritual caused unnecessary loss of life. Instead of surrendering and perhaps regrouping for future battles, some samurais would end their lives, thinking it was the only honorable choice. This leads us to wonder, was the code of honor worth the cost? Could there have been a more practical approach that preserved life rather than sacrificing it? Consider the Battle of Hanoji in 1582, where the famed samurai Oda Nobunaga faced betrayal. Rather than surrender to his enemies, he committed seppuku. His death not only ended his life, but also shifted the power dynamics in Japan, altering history itself. It's a poignant reminder of how personal choices ripple outward and influence broader events. What if he had chosen differently? Another rarely discussed aspect of seppuku is how it reflects a broader societal issue, the pressure to conform. Many samurais felt an overwhelming need to adhere to these practices, fearing that deviating from tradition would bring shame not only to themselves but also to their families and clans. This culture of conformity can resonate with us today. How often do we make choices based on societal expectations instead of our well-being? To add to the complexity, there's the psychological toll of these choices. The very idea of seppuku could lead to mental anguish, knowing that the stakes of failure were so high. Some samurais must have faced crippling anxiety as they weighed their options in the heat of battle, knowing that defeat might lead them down the path of self-destruction. Imagine being in that mental space, where every moment could lead to a life or death decision. In examining these beliefs, we also uncover a hidden irony. The very code that was supposed to bring honor sometimes led to devastating consequences. Could it be that what they thought was a means to preserve their dignity ultimately brought more dishonor to their families? It's a perplexing contradiction that challenges our understanding of honor and bravery. Let's not overlook the tragic reality that some samurais felt they had no other choice. In situations where the pressure was immense, many believed that to live after defeat was worse than dying with honor. This relentless cycle of expectations could drive even the most noble warriors to tragic ends. Now, what if we reflect on our own lives? Are there situations where we feel pressured to uphold standards that don't truly serve us? The story of seppuku serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of questioning our beliefs and considering the broader implications of our choices. So as we consider the complexities of seppuku, we begin to see the delicate balance between honor and life. It raises questions about what it means to truly live honorably in a world that often imposes rigid standards. Could there be a way to honor the past while still finding a path forward that values life above all? By unpacking the ritual of seppuku, we've opened the door to a deeper understanding of the samurai culture. It's a world where honor and tragedy intertwine, leading to choices that, while noble in intent, often resulted in heartbreaking outcomes. As we move on to our next section, we'll explore another baffling strategy that samurais used: charging into battle without a strategy. You won't want to miss how this reckless behavior contributed to their downfall. In a battlefield filled with warriors, swords drawn, ready to fight for their honor. Now picture one group charging headfirst into the fray without a single strategy in mind. Sounds reckless, right? Welcome to the world of samurai warfare, where sometimes sheer bravery was mistaken for tactical genius. Today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most baffling strategies used by samurai: the charge without strategy. When we think of samurai, we often envision skilled warriors trained in combat, adhering to a strict code of honor. But what if I told you that many samurai leaders would order full frontal assaults, believing that just showing up with courage would guarantee victory? This mentality highlights a dangerous flaw in their approach to battle, one that resulted in countless unnecessary casualties. How could they overlook the basic principles of strategy? Consider this: charging into battle without a plan is like diving into a pool without checking the depth. There's a good chance you'll hit bottom hard, and not in the way you hoped. The irony here is that these brave warriors, often lauded for their prowess, sometimes lack the foresight to think critically about the engagements they entered. If only they had paused to strategize, the outcomes might have been vastly different. One strange fact that often goes unnoticed is that samurai warriors often relied on a single battle tactic: the overwhelming force of numbers. In many cases, they believed that if they charged en masse, they could overpower the enemy simply through sheer force. But there's a catch. What happens when the enemy is prepared? This is where the lack of strategy reveals itself. Opposing forces with better planned defenses could easily outmaneuver them, turning the tide of battle against them. Now let's dive deeper into this reckless behavior. The idea of charging without a strategy reflects a broader issue: a misunderstanding of battlefield dynamics. Many samurai leaders often let their pride dictate their actions, believing that bravery alone was enough to secure victory. But bravery without tactics is like a ship without a compass. It's bound to end up lost at sea. Here's something to ponder. What if a samurai warrior was faced with a strategic genius on the opposing side? The reality is, many samurai commanders underestimated their enemies, believing that their own reputation alone would intimidate others into submission. It's a controversial idea that might make you say, "No, I don't agree with that." But history has shown us that this overconfidence frequently led to defeat. An example from the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 illustrates this point vividly. Samurai forces charged into battle believing their fierce reputation would win the day. Instead, they were met with a well-prepared enemy who had devised effective counter-strategies. The result, a staggering loss for the samurai, highlighting the dangers of entering battle without a solid plan. A lesser-known fact is that samurai were not just warriors, they were also scholars of martial arts and strategy. Yet when it came time to implement what they knew, many chose to rely on brute force instead. Imagine having all the knowledge and tools at your disposal, only to ignore them when it matters most. This highlights a disconnect between theory and practice that is as relevant today as it was then. As we unpack this further, we see that many samurai were caught in a cycle of tradition that discouraged innovation. The belief that courage courage could compensate for strategy was deeply ingrained in their culture. This leads us to a pressing question. Could it be that their very code of honor was limiting their ability to adapt to the realities of warfare? Now, let's not forget the psychological aspect of charging without a strategy. Think about it. When faced with an enemy, the adrenaline rush can lead to poor decision-making. Instead of assessing the situation, warriors might rely on instinct and the urge to fight. To illustrate this point, let's look at the concept of Musha Shugyo, a samurai's journey of self-discovery through combat. While this journey emphasizes personal growth, it ironically also highlights the pitfalls of charging into battle without a plan. If samurai were more focused on self-improvement and strategy rather than merely engaging in combat, would they have experienced fewer losses? Ultimately, we arrive at a crucial realization. The consequences of this reckless charging went beyond mere battles lost. Families were torn apart, communities devastated, and the legacy of samurai culture tarnished by preventable defeats. The tragic irony is that the very bravery that defined them often led to their undoing. As we reflect on these insights, we find ourselves asking, what can we learn from the samurai's mistakes? Are there areas in our own lives where we charge ahead without a plan, driven by pride or overconfidence? Just as samurai could have benefited from strategic thinking, we too can adapt our approaches to the challenges we face. The lesson here is clear. Courage is admirable, but it should never replace thoughtful planning and strategy. In the heat of battle or life, it's crucial to pause and assess the situation before diving headfirst into action. We'll now move on to our next section, where we'll explore an equally fascinating yet baffling strategy: fighting in full moonlight. You won't want to miss how superstition sometimes overshadowed practical tactics in samurai warfare. Can a full moon really influence battle tactics? You might be surprised to learn that many samurais believed fighting under a full moon was auspicious. They thought that the bright light would not only illuminate the battlefield but also grant them extra luck. However, this belief often had disastrous consequences. The irony: while they believed they were enhancing their chances of victory, they were actually making themselves easy targets for their opponents. Imagine it. The night is clear, the moon shines brightly overhead, and a group of samurais prepares to charge into battle. They feel invincible under that silvery glow. But what if I told you that the very light they depended on made them visible from miles away? This is where superstition can overshadow practical strategies, leading to deadly mistakes. Let's take a closer look at this phenomenon. The idea of fighting during a full moon comes from centuries-old traditions that emphasize the significance of celestial events. Many cultures believed that the moon held power over human behavior. For the samurai, this belief morphed into a kind of tactical mindset. They would plan battles to coincide with full moons, thinking it would inspire courage and luck. But the strange reality is that this practice often led to more harm than good. Here's an interesting fact. During the Battle of Hanoji in 1582, Oda Nobunaga and his forces were caught off guard during the night, largely illuminated by a full moon. Their opponents could easily see their movements, which played a crucial role in the betrayal that ultimately led to Nobunaga's demise. It's a dramatic reminder of how superstition can eclipse sound judgment. Consider the consequences of this belief. Samurai warriors, trained in martial arts and battle tactics, often disregarded fundamental principles of warfare in favor of their moonlit rituals. When facing an opponent, wouldn't you want to blend into the shadows rather than shine like a beacon? The lack of tactical awareness often led to disastrous outcomes, reinforcing the idea that sometimes belief in luck can blind one to the realities of battle. The irony in all this is that samurai culture emphasized strategy and discipline, yet their reliance on superstitions like the full moon contradicted the very essence of what it meant to be a skilled warrior. This raises a critical question. How often do we let our beliefs dictate our decisions, even when they contradict our training or knowledge? As we examine the impacts of these decisions further, we need to consider how the practice of fighting under a full moon created a culture of risk-taking among samurai. The thought process behind it was simple. If the moon was shining, it must be a sign of favor. But that mindset often led to reckless behavior. Imagine the scene. Samurai warriors, confident in their perceived luck, charging into a fight, only to find themselves trapped in a situation where their confidence turns into vulnerability. It's also worth noting that not all samurai adhered to this practice. Some leaders recognized the inherent dangers of fighting under a full moon and chose to fight when the conditions favored stealth and surprise. This contradiction within samurai culture showcases the tension between tradition and practicality. What can we learn from those who understood the importance of adapting their strategies rather than being bound by superstitions? A strange fact to consider: the very act of fighting during a full moon became a point of ridicule among some samurai circles, circulated about warriors who had fallen victim to their own beliefs, creating a culture of caution among those who preferred to rely on strategy over superstition. This goes to show that not only can beliefs lead to poor decisions, but they can also become the source of humorous anecdotes in a warrior's life. Now, let's dive into the implications of these choices. The consistent reliance on the full moon illustrates a broader issue in samurai warfare: the tendency to prioritize tradition over adaptability. While beliefs can be powerful motivators, they can also cloud judgment and lead to disastrous results on the battlefield. This raises another question: how often do we find ourselves clinging to outdated beliefs, even when evidence suggests we should change our approach? When we consider the balance between superstition and strategy, it becomes clear that effective warfare relies on a keen understanding of the environment, the enemy, and the available resources. By choosing to fight during a full moon, samurai warriors ignored critical aspects of tactical warfare. If they had opted for a more practical approach, they could have exploited the element of surprise, instead of illuminating their position for all to see. As we reflect on these lessons, we see the value of adapting our strategies based on real-world conditions, rather than adhering to traditions that may no longer serve us. Just like the samurai who chose to charge into battle during a full moon, we too can find ourselves making decisions based on outdated beliefs. This is a timely reminder to evaluate the beliefs that guide our actions, and to be willing to adjust our strategies when necessary. Perhaps it's time to let go of the superstitions and embrace a more pragmatic approach to the challenges we face. In summary, the practice of fighting under the full moon highlights the dangers of allowing superstition to dictate tactics. The samurai, revered for their skills, sometimes fell victim to their own beliefs, leading to unnecessary losses. As we transition to the next section, we'll explore yet another baffling strategy that samurai employed: ignoring terrain. You won't want to miss how this disregard for their surroundings often led to catastrophic outcomes in battle. What happens when you overlook your surroundings? In the chaotic realm of samurai warfare, this question took on dire consequences. Some samurais failed to consider the battlefield's terrain, often charging uphill or into dense forests without fully understanding the risks involved. The result: disastrous outcomes and unnecessary losses that could have easily been avoided. Picture a scene from a historical battle. A group of samurai warriors, swords drawn, charging valiantly into an uphill ambush. They feel empowered, believing that their skills will carry them to victory. But what they fail to recognize is the strategic disadvantage they've placed themselves in. This oversight not only affects the outcome of the battle, but also serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding your environment. A fascinating fact about this is that the samurai were not just warriors. They were also trained in strategy and tactics. Yet, despite this training, many ignored the terrain they were fighting on. How could a skilled warrior overlook such a fundamental aspect of battle? The answer lies in a combination of overconfidence and tradition, which often led them to disregard critical environmental factors. For instance, when faced with an uphill battle, the samurai's heavy armor would weigh them down, making them slower and less agile. Did you know that in some battles, this led to a complete rout of samurai forces? The enemy, well prepared and positioned on higher ground, could launch attacks with far greater effectiveness. This highlights a crucial problem. When warriors ignore their surroundings, they set themselves up for failure. Imagine you're in the middle of a dense forest, surrounded by towering trees. Visibility is limited, and every step could lead to hidden dangers. Yet, instead of moving cautiously, some samurai charged headlong into the unknown, believing that their skills would guide them through. But what if they had taken the time to survey their environment? An informed strategy could have turned the tide in their favor. This brings us to a lesser-known but striking fact. Many samurai would often rely on their instinct alone, disregarding the geographical nuances of the battlefield. They believed that sheer skill and bravery could carry the day, but this mindset often led to fatal mistakes. There's a humorous irony here. Warriors who prided themselves on their tactical prowess often made the most basic of blunders. How could they overlook something as fundamental as the ground beneath their feet? A revealing case study involves the Battle of Kawanakajima, where samurai forces charged without considering the rivers and valleys that complicated their approach. This miscalculation led to chaos and confusion, allowing the enemy to exploit the terrain and gain the upper hand. What if they had paused to strategize and account for the natural obstacles? The battle could have unfolded quite differently. But this isn't just a lesson in warfare. It's a valuable takeaway for all of us. How often do we charge into situations without fully understanding our environment? Either in our careers, relationships, or personal endeavors, overlooking our surroundings can lead to unnecessary challenges. The samurai's reliance on skill over situational awareness serves as a poignant reminder of the need to be mindful and observant. As we reflect on the consequences of ignoring terrain, it's essential to recognize the broader implications of this oversight. The samurai culture was rich in tradition and honor, yet these values sometimes clouded their judgment. By failing to adapt and consider their surroundings, they allowed outdated beliefs to dictate their actions. In summary, a samurai's tendency to overlook the terrain in battle reveals a significant flaw in their strategy. The combination of overconfidence and tradition often led them to ignore critical factors that could impact the outcome of a battle. As we continue to explore the various strategies samurai employed, we must ask ourselves how we can apply these lessons to our own lives, ensuring that we remain aware of our surroundings and adaptable to changing circumstances. As we transition to the next section, we'll delve into how some samurai's reliance on honor over skills led to their downfall. This revelation might just challenge your perception of what it truly means to be a warrior. Don't miss out on how misplaced priorities can shape our decisions. What if honor was more important than skill? In the world of samurai warfare, this question highlights a significant flaw in their approach to battle. Many samurais placed an overwhelming emphasis on their reputation and the notion of honor, often believing that simply showing up would ensure their victory. The irony? This overconfidence frequently led to their downfall. Imagine a battlefield battlefield where samurais, clad in their ornate armor, charged into combat with the conviction that their honor alone would intimidate the enemy. But what happens when the enemy is prepared and determined? The reality is that while they prided themselves on their noble heritage, many samurai ignored essential battle tactics that could have saved their lives. Surprising fact is that samurai sometimes thought they could win battles just by being present. They believed their mere reputation would instill fear in their opponents. Their bravado only encouraged the enemy to fight harder. The paradox of honor and reputation can lead to fatal miscalculations on the battlefield. Consider the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, where the Takeda clan, known for its fierce cavalry, faced off against the Oda and Tokugawa forces. The Takeda samurais charged headfirst, believing their honor and reputation as skilled horsemen would lead them to victory. However, they were met with well-prepared gunfire that decimated their ranks. The shocking defeat demonstrated that honor alone was no substitute for effective strategy and preparation. Let's break this down. Many samurais operated under the assumption that skill was secondary to the reputation they built over years of service. This belief is a bit controversial, pushing the viewer to say, "No, I don't agree with that." But historical evidence suggests that this mindset consistently backfired. By overvaluing their honor, they became complacent, neglecting to hone the very skills that defined them as warriors. Here's a rare fact: the concept of shame was so deeply rooted in samurai culture that some warriors would rather die than admit defeat. This was not just a personal failing. It reflected a societal expectation that discouraged retreat or strategic withdrawal. The emphasis on honor created a cycle of bravado that often outweighed sound tactical decisions. Imagine being in a situation where your honor and pride become a barrier to survival. This was the reality for many samurai. Now let's consider the psychological implications. When warriors rely solely on their reputation, they can become overconfident, believing they can overcome any challenge simply by being present. This leads to a critical issue. What happens when they encounter a more strategically adept enemy? They find themselves outmaneuvered and outsmarted. The tragic irony is that their very commitment to honor could lead to their undoing. This discussion brings us to a vital question. How does this reliance on reputation hinder the development of practical skills? Just as in life, when individuals focus more on appearances or what others think, they can lose sight of personal growth and development. The samurai's story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of balancing honor with practical skill sets. A thought-provoking takeaway from this examination is that honor is not inherently negative. It becomes a problem when it overshadows the need for strategy and adaptability. In modern life, we can find parallels in various fields, from business to sports, where individuals might prioritize image over performance. As we reflect on these insights, it's crucial to recognize that samurai culture also included a deep respect for skill and discipline. The true masters were those who balanced their reputation with constant practice and improvement. The question remains, can we find that balance in our own lives? In summary, the reliance on honor over skills presents a compelling narrative about the pitfalls of overconfidence. The samurai warriors, though highly trained, sometimes fell victim to their own pride and misplaced beliefs, leading to catastrophic defeat. As we continue to explore the various strategies employed by samurai, let's keep in mind the importance of combining honor with practical skills for true effectiveness. Next, we'll delve into another fascinating aspect of samurai warfare, the belief in the warrior spirit. You'll want to stick around to uncover how this belief both inspired courage and often led to unexpected defeats. Spirit enough to win a fight. In the world of samurai, many warriors believed that sheer willpower and determination, often referred to as the warrior spirit, could secure their victory. They thought their unyielding spirit would intimidate opponents into submission. But what if I told you this belief often ignored critical battle tactics? This oversight sometimes led to unexpected and devastating defeats. Imagine a group of samurai, faces set with resolve, charging toward their enemies, fueled by the conviction that their warrior spirit alone would ensure their success. They trust that their belief in themselves would turn the tide. However, this can lead to a critical problem, underestimating the tactical prowess of their adversaries. The reality is, while the spirit is an important aspect of combat, it is not a substitute for strategy. A surprising fact about this belief is that it often created a false sense of security. Many samurai were so confident in their spirit that they neglected to devise concrete battle plans. They believed that their courage would carry them through any confrontation. Yet history shows us time and again that this mindset can be dangerously naive. What happens when an opponent is not only courageous but also strategically superior? Take, for example, the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Samurai from the Toyotomi clan, emboldened by their warrior spirit, charged into battle against the forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Despite their fervent resolve, they faced a well-coordinated and strategically superior enemy. The result was a staggering defeat, and the Toyotomi clan was effectively dismantled. This illustrates a crucial lesson. Belief in one's spirit must be complemented by tactical awareness to be effective. Let's delve into the psychology behind this reliance on spirit. When samurai placed too much emphasis on their inner resolve, they often overlooked essential tactical considerations. For instance, they might charge without assessing the battlefield, believing that their fighting spirit would overcome any obstacle. However, this approach frequently resulted in vulnerability against more strategic foes. In essence, their belief in spirit became a double-edged sword. Here's a rare fact. The term Bushido, which means the way of the warrior, emphasizes honor, loyalty, and courage. However, this code also inadvertently placed undue emphasis on the spirit at the expense of practical skills. Some samurai could be so preoccupied with embodying the ideal warrior that they neglected training and preparation. The irony is profound. By chasing an ideal, they often missed the reality of effective combat. This begs the question, how does an over-reliance on spirit lead to unexpected defeats? One answer lies in the disconnect between mental fortitude and battlefield realities. When warriors depend solely on their spirit, they may ignore crucial factors like terrain, enemy strength, and available resources. The inability to adapt to these realities can lead to catastrophic consequences. Consider the Battle of Kawanakajima, where two legendary warlords faced off. The samurai, believing in their unmatched spirit, charged recklessly into the fray. Their enemy, however, had carefully studied the terrain and devised a solid strategy. The result? A devastating defeat for the samurai, demonstrating that heart alone cannot win a war. As we unpack this further, let's acknowledge the strange fact that even within samurai culture, the warrior spirit was sometimes viewed with skepticism. Some experienced warriors understood that while spirit is important, it should never replace the need for strategy and preparation. They recognized the value of balancing courage with practical skills and tactics. This highlights a critical lesson for all of us: the importance of not letting our enthusiasm blind us to the details. Whether in personal endeavors or professional pursuits, relying solely on our spirit without a solid foundation can lead to missed opportunities and setbacks. In summary, the belief in the warrior spirit as a primary means to achieve victory reflects a significant flaw in samurai strategy. While spirit and determination are commendable, they cannot replace the need for tactical acumen and preparation. As we continue to explore the various strategies employed by samurai, let's keep this lesson in mind and consider how we can balance our enthusiasm with strategic thinking in our own lives. Next, we'll delve into the strict code of Bushido and examine how adherence to this code sometimes led to foolish choices. Stay tuned to discover how an unwavering commitment to duty can sometimes cloud judgment. Can a strict code of ethics lead to foolish choices? In the world of the samurai, the answer is a resounding yes. The code of Bushido emphasized loyalty, bravery, and honor, shaping the very identity of these warriors. But what happens when adherence to this code comes at the cost of sound judgment? Many samurais felt an intense obligation to follow orders without question, driven by their commitment to honor. Imagine a samurai on the battlefield, faced with a decision that could determine the outcome of a fight. Instead of weighing the pros and cons, he blindly follows orders from his superior. This unwavering loyalty, while admirable, can lead to poorly thought out strategies and disastrous consequences. An interesting fact to consider is that the concept of Bushido wasn't just about bravery in battle. It encompassed a whole philosophy of life, including morality and ethics. Yet, in their quest to uphold these ideals, some samurai found themselves making decisions that prioritized duty over common sense. For instance, in the heat of battle, a samurai might refuse to retreat even when the situation called for it, believing that doing so would dishonor his lord. This leads us to a controversial point. Many modern interpretations of Bushido celebrate the code without fully recognizing its potential drawbacks. Some argue that a rigid adherence to such codes can lead to unnecessary loss of life. It raises the question, can a commitment to honor ever become a liability? Let's dive deeper into the implications of this code. The Bushido code placed a premium on loyalty. But what if loyalty to a misguided leader resulted in a reckless decision? In historical battles, there are numerous accounts of samurai fighting valiantly only to face defeat because they followed orders that didn't take into account the evolving dynamics of the battle. For instance, during the Sengoku period, many samurai clans faced ruin because their leaders refused to adapt strategies, clinging instead to outdated tactics rooted in tradition. Here's a little known fact. Some samurai would actually write down their orders with the belief that following them to the letter was the only way to maintain honor. But this rigid structure often led to situations where critical thinking was completely sidelined. As a result, some samurai fought bravely but blindly, leading to catastrophic outcomes. The potential for poor decision-making raises a vital issue. How can honor and loyalty coexist with the need for strategic thinking? When the stakes are high, such as in battle, the inability to question orders or adapt to circumstances can lead to severe repercussions. It's essential to balance one's commitment to honor with the ability to think critically in the moment. A revealing case study is the Siege of Osaka in 1614 to 1615, where the Toyotomi clan faced off against Tokugawa forces. Despite their resolve and the honor of defending their territory, the Toyotomi samurai clung to their old ways. They followed orders without adapting to the superior strategies employed by their enemies. The result, their defeat and the end of their clan. This situation serves as a reminder that while the ideals of Bushido were noble, they could also be blinding. A strict code can sometimes lead to a refusal to acknowledge reality. When duty outweighs common sense, warriors risk everything for principles that might not hold up under scrutiny. As we reflect on the implications of Bushido, we must ask ourselves, how can we apply these lessons to our own lives? In modern contexts, blind loyalty can occur in various scenarios, whether in corporate settings, friendships, or even family dynamics. Understanding the balance between loyalty and critical thinking can be vital in making better decisions. In summary, while the code of Bushido shaped the samurai ethos, it also contributed to some of their most foolish choices. The dedication to honor and loyalty, while admirable, sometimes clouded judgment and led to disastrous outcomes. As we continue our exploration of samurai strategies, let's keep this lesson in mind and consider how we can maintain our principles without sacrificing our ability to think critically. Next, we'll delve into the tendency of samurai to engage in single combat, often for the sake of honor. You won't want to miss how this pursuit of personal glory could lead to significant risks on the battlefield. Is it wise to challenge one opponent when facing many? Engaging in single combat for honor was a hallmark of samurai culture, but the reality of this practice reveals some serious flaws in their approach to warfare. Many samurais believe that single combat showcased their skills and valor. Picture this: a samurai stands firm, sword in hand, ready to face his opponent one-on-one, surrounded by a chaotic battlefield. This notion of personal glory was ingrained in their culture, making it seem like the ultimate test of strength and honor. But here's the catch: while the samurai was focused on his personal duel, he often became isolated and vulnerable to attacks from others. What happens when you put honor above strategy? Strange yet telling fact is that, in many historical accounts, samurai would sometimes choose to engage in single combat even when vastly outnumbered. This created an environment where personal pride overshadowed tactical prudence. Instead of working together with their fellow warriors, they often risked everything for a fleeting moment of glory. A controversial point here is that while many admire the samurai spirit, this tendency to prioritize individual combat can actually be seen as a foolish strategy in the face of overwhelming odds. Some may argue that this bravado is what makes samurai legendary, but the reality is that it frequently led to their downfall. A classic example of this can be traced back to the Battle of Nagasino in 1575, where samurai who engaged in single combat found themselves cut down by enemy gunfire, leaving their troops vulnerable and demoralized. As we dive deeper, consider how this behavior is counterproductive. While single combat may seem like a brave choice, it often led to disastrous outcomes for entire clans. The focus on individual prowess can lead to a lack of cohesion within the group. Imagine an entire unit fighting together, but one samurai breaks ranks to challenge an enemy leader, leaving his allies to fend for themselves. It's essential to highlight that engaging in single combat not only puts the individual at risk, but also jeopardizes the collective strength of their forces. Teamwork is paramount in battle, and when one warrior is distracted by personal glory, it can create openings for the enemy. The need for collaboration is critical. Many successful armies throughout history understood the importance of coordinated efforts and mutual support. Consider this little-known fact: during feudal Japan, some samurai clans would even discourage individual duels in favor of group tactics. They realized that fighting together increased their chances of survival and success on the battlefield. Yet the romanticized notion of the lone warrior persisted, often leading to tragic consequences. This raises an intriguing question: how can we apply these lessons to our modern lives? In various fields, from sports to business, focusing solely on personal achievement can sometimes overshadow the importance of teamwork. The obsession with individual accolades may distract from the collective goals of a group. Reflecting on this can lead to a vital realization: prioritizing personal glory over collective success can have negative consequences. While it's important to hone individual skills, it's equally critical to remember that collaboration often leads to greater achievements. To sum up, the samurai's focus on single combat, while rooted in honor, often led to vulnerabilities and losses that could have been avoided through teamwork. As we move forward, consider how balancing personal pride with collaboration can change outcomes, whether on the battlefield or in everyday life. Next, we'll explore the concept of the no-retreat mentality that many samurai adopted. You won't want to miss how this attitude could turn a potentially strategic retreat into a grave error. Can refusing to retreat be a bad strategy? This is a question that resonates deeply when examining the samurai mentality on the battlefield. Many samurais believed that retreating was synonymous with weakness. This ideology led them to fight until the last man, clinging to their honor at the expense of their lives and the lives of their comrades. Picture a battlefield where samurai stand their ground, swords drawn against overwhelming odds. The air is thick with tension, and the clashing of steel echoes through the hills. Despite the enemy's numerical superiority, these warriors refuse to back down. Their courage is admirable, but at what cost? What if I told you that this steadfast refusal to retreat often resulted in unnecessary bloodshed? A strange yet impactful fact is that during the Sengoku period, a time of constant military conflict in Japan, many samurai clans suffered devastating losses due to their no-retreat mentality. They would charge into battle, fully aware they were outnumbered, driven by a desire to uphold their honor. In essence, they often viewed retreat as an act of cowardice rather than a tactical maneuver. The tragic irony here is that their commitment to this mindset often led to their destruction. Controversially, while many celebrate the samurai spirit, one could argue that this mindset of unwavering resolve is fundamentally flawed. The reality is that strategically retreating can be a smart decision. For instance, in modern warfare, retreating allows for regrouping, re-strategizing, and preserving lives for future battles. Samurai culture glorified the notion of fighting fighting to the death, often leading to catastrophic consequences. Think about the Battle of Kawanakajima, where several samurai clans faced each other in a series of fierce confrontations. In one such clash, rather than retreating when it became evident they were losing, warriors fought on. This resulted in staggering casualties and left their clans vulnerable in subsequent battles. Imagine how different the outcome could have been if they had chosen to retreat and regroup. This fixation on honor and the refusal to retreat also created a culture where making sound tactical decisions became secondary. The dilemma here is clear. The desire to maintain a warrior's reputation can sometimes cloud judgment. While bravery and honor are commendable traits, they must be balanced with wisdom and strategy. Let's consider the implications of this mentality in contemporary contexts. In business, for example, how many times have we seen companies persist with failing strategies simply because they refuse to pivot? Much like the samurai, these companies risk everything for the sake of reputation, often resulting in disastrous consequences. A lesser-known fact is that some samurai commanders would actually strategize for potential retreats as a fallback plan, understanding that a tactical withdrawal can sometimes lead to victory in future engagements. This duality illustrates a fascinating truth. Even the most honor-bound warriors recognize the importance of adaptability. As we unpack this idea further, consider this. How do we apply these lessons to our everyday lives? The principle of knowing when to step back, reassess, and regroup is not just applicable in warfare. It's crucial in various aspects of our lives. Whether it's in our careers, relationships, or personal challenges, embracing the idea of retreat when necessary can lead to healthier outcomes. To sum it up, the samurai's no-retreat mentality, while rooted in a desire for honor, often resulted in unnecessary losses and vulnerabilities. The willingness to retreat can be seen as a strategic decision rather than a sign of weakness. As we continue to explore these strategies, we'll see that a blend of bravery, wisdom, and adaptability is crucial for success in any endeavor. Next, we'll delve into the surprising and rather unconventional strategy of using fireworks as distractions in battle. You might be surprised to learn just how chaotic and counterproductive this tactic could be. Ever heard of samurai using fireworks in battle? It might sound outrageous, but some samurai clans thought this was a brilliant strategy to confuse their enemies. They would light up colorful pyrotechnics, believing that the explosions would create chaos on the battlefield. However, the reality was often quite the opposite. Imagine the shock of watching your own troops become disoriented and fearful due to a strategy meant to intimidate the enemy. Fireworks were supposed to serve as distractions, a way to instill panic in their foes. But here's the catch. What they often achieved was the exact reverse. Instead of scaring the enemy, the bright lights and loud bangs led to confusion among their ranks. Troops could lose their focus, tripping over one another, and in some cases even turning on each other. Picture it. The very tools intended to create chaos instead sowed chaos among their own forces. Isn't that a strange twist? It's controversial to think that such flamboyant tactics, celebrated for their creativity, could lead to disarray. While samurai culture highly valued the art of war and strategic deception, this reliance on flashy distractions often compromised battlefield efficiency. Some might argue that the samurai should have stuck to more conventional tactics. After all, if you can't trust your own army to remain composed under pressure, how can you expect to win the battle? A lesser-known fact is that this tactic wasn't entirely unique to samurai. Various cultures throughout history have experimented with distracting techniques in warfare. The Romans, for example, used music and theatrics to confuse their enemies. However, the real question remains, did these distractions truly work? The answer, in the case of the samurai, seems to be a resounding no. By focusing on distractions like fireworks, samurai leaders often overlooked fundamental battle strategies. But relying on such a gimmick ignored the basic principles of warfare, understanding the enemy, terrain, and the importance of troop morale. Instead of creating chaos in the enemy camp, they created confusion within their own rank. This leads us to consider, what are the risks of relying on flashy distractions? This over-reliance on spectacle can lead to detrimental outcomes, not just in battle, but in many aspects of life. Whether in sports, business, or personal endeavors, relying on flashy tactics rather than solid planning and execution can lead to failure. In a world that often prioritizes immediate visual impact, it's crucial to remember that substance is what truly wins the day. Consider this. What if the samurai had invested their energy into rigorous training or innovative tactics instead of fireworks? This could have potentially changed the course of battles. Effective strategies build on the strengths and weaknesses of both your forces and your enemies, rather than relying on unpredictable spectacles. As we reflect on the lesson of fireworks as distractions, think about how we can apply these insights to our lives. The truth is, while creativity and flair have their place, they should never substitute for solid preparation and strategy. Understanding the strengths of both your team and your competition can yield much better results than a flashy, but ultimately ineffective distraction. In conclusion, the samurai's attempt to use fireworks as a distraction illustrates the dangers of prioritizing showmanship over strategy. It serves as a reminder that relying on gimmicks can lead to confusion and chaos, not only on the battlefield, but in every aspect of our lives. Next, we'll examine the pitfalls of overconfidence in ranged weapons, where some samurai believed that archers would always secure victory. You might be surprised to see how neglecting lacking close combat skills proved to be a fatal flaw in their strategies. Isn't it ironic that while samurai warriors are celebrated for their prowess and discipline, they sometimes overlooked one crucial element of warfare: gathering intelligence? Surprisingly, many samurai dismissed the importance of understanding their enemy, relying instead on sheer force and personal honor. They believed that a warrior's strength and skills would prevail in any situation, which was a risky mindset. Most people think that intelligence gathering is a modern military tactic, but the truth is, it has been a crucial element of warfare for centuries. Some samurai leaders failed to realize that knowing the enemy's movements and strategies could significantly alter the course of a battle. Imagine stepping onto the battlefield, completely unprepared for what lies ahead because you underestimated your opponent. One might wonder, how did such a strategic oversight occur among these renowned fighters? It seems baffling that warriors who dedicated their lives to mastering combat would overlook such a fundamental aspect of strategy. The answer lies in the cultural emphasis on personal honor and reputation over careful planning. Samurais often believed that valor and skill alone would lead them to victory, ignoring the fact that the battlefield is a dynamic environment filled with variables that require constant assessment. An interesting fact about samurai culture is that they often saw the act of fighting as a personal challenge. The desire to showcase individual strength led to a focus on personal combat prowess rather than team strategies. They thought that if they were brave enough, they could win, even against overwhelming odds. But what happens when pride gets in the way of prudent decision-making? They might charge into battle, but without understanding the enemy's strengths, they were setting themselves up for failure. This approach led to some disastrous consequences. In several historical battles, samurai troops suffered significant losses because they failed to scout enemy positions or understand their tactic. For instance, during the Battle of Kawanakajima, many samurai were caught off guard by the clever strategies of their opponents, leading to a devastating defeat. What if they had invested time in intelligence gathering? It could have changed the entire outcome of that battle. Furthermore, it's crucial to consider that many samurai leaders relied on a mix of anecdotal experiences rather than systematic intelligence. They often misjudged the capabilities of their enemies based on looks or reputation rather than hard evidence. It's a classic case of assuming that appearances tell the whole story, a mistake that can be costly on the battlefield. Imagine the sheer shock when they realized that a seemingly weaker opponent could have a strategic advantage or a secret weapon. This highlights the critical need for effective reconnaissance and intelligence, not just for samurai, but for anyone facing competition or conflict in any field. The ability to adapt and change based on new information is vital to success. Let's pause for a moment to reflect on this idea. What if samurai had valued intelligence just as much as bravery? The dynamic of warfare could have shifted dramatically. Serves as a valuable lesson for us today. Whether in business negotiations or personal confrontations, gathering information can be the key to outsmarting the competition. The bottom line is that samurai warriors, revered for their discipline and honor, sometimes miss the mark by neglecting the power of intelligence gathering. This oversight illustrates the importance of comprehensive strategy, blending valor with wisdom. It's a reminder that while courage is admirable, it should not come at the expense of strategy and understanding. As we move forward, let's explore the next point in our discussion: the overconfidence in ranged weapons and how some samurai armies place too much faith in their archers. This belief often left them unprepared for close combat, leading to devastating consequences in battle. Some samurais believed that engaging in psychological warfare could be the key to securing victory. They thought that by intimidating their opponents with loud cries and fierce displays, they could sow fear and cause the enemy to flee before the fight even began. However, this approach often had the opposite effect, igniting a fire in their enemies rather than extinguishing it. Most people think that fear is a reliable weapon in warfare, but the reality is more complex. A well-timed show of strength can intimidate, but it can also provoke a more formidable response. Imagine facing an opponent who, instead of backing down, becomes even more resolute in their determination to fight back. This is exactly what happened in many encounters where samurai tactics of intimidation fell flat. Consider the Battle of Nagashino in 1575. Samurai forces, confident in their reputation and fierce war cries, faced a rival army that had adopted gunpowder weaponry. While the samurai shouted and charged, they were met with a hail of gunfire that shattered their ranks. Cries that were supposed to instill fear only served to highlight their underestimation of the enemy's capabilities. What if they had focused on strategy instead of bravado? The outcome could have been very different. This brings us to an intriguing point. Why did samurai leaders rely so heavily on psychological intimidation? One reason is rooted in their culture. Honor and reputation were paramount. In a society that valued strength and courage, the idea of psychological warfare seemed a natural extension of those principles. However, it also highlights a critical flaw in their strategy. They often misjudged the power of sheer will and bravado in the face of calculated tactics. Here's a strange yet true fact. The samurai once believed that making loud, intimidating noises before battle would frighten away evil spirits. It's a humorous thought that highlights a more serious issue. They prioritized theatrics over practicality. This ritualistic approach to battle often blinded them to the realities of warfare, leading to unexpected consequences. The problem with relying on intimidation as a primary tactic is that it can lead to to overconfidence. When samurai leaders believed that they could intimidate their foes, they often neglected to consider the actual fighting capabilities of their opponents. This can be a dangerous oversight. Imagine walking into a confrontation thinking your reputation alone will secure victory, only to find that your enemy is more prepared and determined than you anticipated. In many instances, the belief in psychological warfare backfired. Rather than causing enemies to retreat, it motivated them to stand their ground and fight even harder. In battle, where stakes are life or death, underestimating an opponent can lead to catastrophic outcomes. The samurai learned this lesson the hard way when their traditional tactics fell short against foes who were prepared to engage. As we explore this topic further, it's essential to recognize the importance of understanding your opponent's mindset and psychology. Success in warfare, much like in life, often depends on adaptability and the ability to read the situation accurately. Psychological tactics can certainly play a role, but they should complement, not replace, solid strategy and preparation. To sum it up, while samurai warriors were skilled fighters, their reliance on psychological warfare sometimes clouded their judgment. The focus on intimidation often led to overconfidence and significant losses when facing more strategically aware opponents. This serves as a reminder that in any competitive scenario, be it business, sports, or personal conflicts, true strength lies in a balance of strategy, preparation, and the capacity to adapt to changing circumstances. Now that we've examined the pitfalls of psychological warfare, let's turn our attention to the next strategy: the tendency to underestimate the enemy. What happens when a samurai believes their opponent is weak? How did this mindset lead to unexpected defeats? Let's delve into this critical aspect of samurai warfare. When it comes to warfare, few things can be as vital as understanding your enemy. Yet many samurais fell prey to the assumption that their opponents were weak or inferior based on their appearance. This led to a series of devastating underestimations that would often result in their downfall. Most people think that strength and skill on the battlefield are the only indicators of a worthy opponent. However, the reality is that intelligence, tactics, and unexpected resources can turn the tide of battle. Imagine the shock of a samurai charging into battle, convinced of an easy victory, only to face an opponent who outmaneuvers and outsmarts them at every turn. Consider the famous conflict known as the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The Tokugawa forces underestimated the prowess and tactical brilliance of their opponents, believing them to be disorganized and weak. This grave miscalculation led to a significant loss that shaped the future of Japan. Had they taken the time to assess their adversaries accurately, the outcome might have been entirely different. One particularly strange fact about samurai culture is their reliance on a concept known as kiai, or the spirit shout. Some samurais believed that a fierce shout could intimidate their enemies and showcase their strength. However, in many cases, this fierce shout could have led to overconfidence and a serious misjudgment of their opponent's ability. The issue of underestimating the enemy is compounded by the fact that many samurais had a rigid view of honor and battle. They believed that victory should be won through direct confrontation, often overlooking strategic maneuvering that could yield better results. This pride in direct combat sometimes blinded them to the strengths of their enemies, leading them to believe that smaller or less armored foes were easy targets. Such foes could be strategically brilliant, utilizing their perceived weakness to gain the upper hand. A little known but crucial point is that samurai warriors often relied on their reputation alone to instill fear in their enemies. While this reputation might have been intimidating, it often failed to account for the strategic depth and experience of their opponents. The samurai's confidence in their reputation led to dangerous complacency, and many learned the hard way that assumptions based on appearances can be fatal. The problem with underestimating your enemy lies in the inability to adapt. When samurais entered battle with preconceived notions about their foes, they often failed to adjust their strategies as needed. The outcome could be catastrophic. Imagine believing you could easily defeat a smaller opponent, only to find that they have superior tactics and a well-planned strategy. In summary, the tendency to underestimate the enemy has proven to be one of the dumbest strategies employed by samurais. Their over-reliance on honor, reputation, and appearances often led them to misjudge their opponents. A lack of adaptability and insight into enemy strengths could turn even the most skilled warriors into casualties. As we shift our focus to the next strategy, let's delve into the often damaging tendency of samurais to avoid forming alliances. What drove them to believe that collaboration was a sign of weakness? How did this mindset contribute to their failures on the battlefield? Let's uncover the reasons behind their reluctance to seek allies and the consequences of this choice. Is it wise to go it alone in battle? Some samurais certainly thought so, as they often refused to form alliances. This belief stemmed from a deep-rooted conviction that relying on others was a sign of weakness, a concept that seems almost paradoxical when you consider the realities of warfare. Imagine facing a formidable enemy alone, believing you could single-handedly turn the tide, while your foes unite against you in overwhelming numbers. Most people think that strength comes from individual skill alone, but the reality is that collaboration and unity can often lead to greater success than any one warrior could achieve alone. Consider the legendary alliances formed among rival clans during the Warring States period. These collaborations often brought together various strengths, allowing them to confront larger and more powerful adversaries. However, many samurais failed to see the value in these alliances, leading to their downfall. A strange fact about samurai culture is their unwavering belief in the concept of Bushido, or the way of the warrior, which emphasized loyalty and honor above all else. This belief system often prevented samurais from seeking help, as they feared it would tarnish their reputation. Yet, paradoxically, this sense of pride often resulted in their isolation on the battlefield, making them vulnerable to enemies who were more adaptable and willing to form strategic partnerships. The problem lies in the fact that while samurais were trained to fight fiercely, they were often ill-prepared for the realities of group dynamics in warfare. They believed that individual prowess and personal honor would secure victory, but they failed to account for the effectiveness of a united front. The famous Battle of Anagawa in 1570 is a perfect example. The forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu and his allies faced off against the Azai and Asakura clans. The unity of the Azai and Asakura clans showcased how two forces could combine their strengths against a common enemy, ultimately leading to their victory. Little known but vital is the fact that historical battles often swung on the willingness to cooperate, or felt that forming alliances would compromise their integrity. History shows us that the greatest warriors often relied on the support of others to achieve their goals. When the samurai code encouraged isolation, it directly contradicted the practical realities of warfare. So what were the consequences of this refusal to collaborate? Time and again, samurais found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered, leading to avoidable defeats. A single warrior might have unmatched skill, but without the backing of allies, even the mightiest could fall. It begs the question, could their pride have led them to ignore the very strategies that could have ensured their survival? In summary, the avoidance of alliances proved to be one of the dumbest strategies employed by samurais. Their belief that relying on others was a weakness resulted in high-stakes situations that often turned disastrous. The notion that individual prowess alone could guarantee victory blinded them to the power of unity in battles. As we move on to our next topic, let's explore another aspect of samurai culture: the risks of sticking too rigidly to tradition in a world that was constantly evolving. What were the consequences of their refusal to innovate? How did their adherence to tradition ultimately hinder their effectiveness on the battlefield? Let's dive deeper into the ways that a lack of adaptation affected samurai tactics and outcomes. Can tradition hinder progress? This question is critical when evaluating the strategies of samurais, who are often rigidly bound to traditional methods. Picture this: a seasoned samurai, clad in armor that has not evolved for centuries, clings to the way things have always been done while the battlefield transforms around him. As new tactics and technologies emerge, this steadfast adherence to tradition can become a liability, leading to defeat in battles that require adaptability. Most people think that maintaining traditions is essential for preserving culture and honor, but the reality is that clinging too tightly to the past can prevent innovation and adaptation, which are crucial in the ever-evolving landscape of warfare. During the Sengoku period, for instance, while many samurai clans engaged in traditional fighting styles, they often overlooked advancements in tactics and weaponry employed by their adversaries. One particularly strange fact is that the samurai's resistance to change was rooted in the very fabric of their identity. Many samurai believed that their honor depended on their adherence to Bushido, the way of the warrior, which emphasized loyalty and tradition. This mindset created an environment where questioning established practices was often frowned upon, leading to a reluctance to adapt. Imagine a warrior who could easily learn new skills but chooses to rely on outdated techniques instead. This not only limits their effectiveness, but can also endanger their comrades. The problem here is not just about individual combat skills. It extends to the larger strategies employed by entire clans. The Battle of Nagashino in 1575 serves as a perfect illustration. Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces, equipped with firearms and new tactics, outmaneuvered the traditional cavalry charges of the Takeda clan, who relied on their historic strength. The refusal of the Takeda to adapt to these changes resulted in a devastating defeat that could have been avoided had they embraced innovation. A little-known fact that may surprise you is that some samurai clans did recognize the need for change, but faced significant internal opposition. For instance, the Ode clan's innovative strategies led them to success, but this was met with skepticism and resistance from more traditional factions within their ranks. It highlights a crucial dilemma: how can a warrior sworn to uphold tradition also be the catalyst for necessary change? So what are the consequences of this refusal to innovate? Time and again, samurais found themselves outmatched and outmaneuvered, their reliance on tradition proving detrimental in battles against more adaptable foes. The notion that traditional methods alone could guarantee victory was repeatedly challenged by the realities of warfare, where flexibility often trumped rigidity. In summary, the samurai's strict adherence to tradition proved to be one of the dumbest strategies employed by them. Their belief that change would compromise their honor not only limited their effectiveness, but also jeopardized the safety of their comrades. The refusal to innovate meant that even the most skilled warriors could be left vulnerable to enemies who embraced new tactics and technologies. As we transition to our next topic, let's delve into the risks associated with neglecting training and preparation. How did the samurai's approach to practice impact their effectiveness on the battlefield? What lessons can we learn about the importance of continuous skill development in any field? Let's explore how the neglect of practical training can lead to dire consequences in warfare. Can lack of practice lead lead to failure? This is a crucial question when we examine the samurai's approach to training. Picture a samurai warrior, confident in his skills, stepping onto the battlefield. But what if that confidence is based more on theory than practical experience? Surprisingly, many samurai prioritized understanding the philosophy of combat over hands-on training, leading to dire consequences in real-life scenarios. Most people think that the samurai were relentless practitioners, constantly honing their skills. The reality, however, is that while many samurai had a deep understanding of martial arts philosophy, they often neglected the rigorous practice required to execute those theories effectively. This gap between knowledge and execution could be the difference between life and death on the battlefield. A curious fact that might make you think is that many samurai believed their inherent talent and the teachings of their masters were sufficient. They thought that simply attending a few lessons would prepare them for any encounter. In truth, the most successful warriors were those who dedicated time to repetitive practice, training until their skills were second nature. Imagine someone preparing for a marathon. The theory behind running isn't enough. It's the hours spent training that make the difference. This overconfidence in theoretical knowledge led to several significant failures. Take the Battle of Anagawa in 1570, for example. The samurai forces, despite having a strong understanding of military tactics, faced defeat against a better prepared enemy. Their inability to adapt their theoretical knowledge into effective strategies during combat showcased the severe consequences of neglecting practical training. The problem becomes even clearer when you consider how warriors often practiced alone, relying on their instincts and previous experiences, rather than engaging in simulated battles with their peers. This lack of cooperative training resulted in warriors who could execute individual moves flawlessly, but struggled to function effectively as a unit. They were unprepared for the chaotic nature of real battles, where teamwork and adaptability are critical. What's even more surprising is that samurai training did include some practical elements, but these were often overshadowed by an emphasis on honor, etiquette, and personal conduct. Many samurai were so focused on maintaining their image that they overlooked the need for rigorous combat training. They often believed that their reputations alone would carry them through battle, which was a grave misconception. As a lesser-known fact, the samurai also utilized training with wooden weapons and practicing kata, which are predetermined movements or forms. However, the emphasis on kata sometimes limited their adaptability when faced with unpredictable opponents. Training for specific scenarios without allowing for flexibility can lead to disastrous outcomes. Imagine being so prepared for a scripted performance that when the unexpected happens, you're left stunned and unresponsive. In summary, the neglect of practical training led to the downfall of many samurai in battle. The belief that knowledge alone would suffice without the rigorous practice to back it up created warriors who were ill-prepared for the realities of combat. As we transition to our next topic, we'll examine how misjudging the value of intelligence can impact strategies on the battlefield. How can ignoring the importance of gathering information lead to unexpected failures? Let's explore the consequences of underestimating the role of intelligence in warfare. What if the best strategy was never considered? This is a critical question to ponder as we dive into the often overlooked realm of intelligence gathering in the samurai tradition. While we think of samurai as highly disciplined and strategic warriors, they sometimes ignored a key aspect of warfare: understanding their enemy's movements and intentions. Most people believe that brute strength and exceptional swordsmanship are what secured victory for samurai on the battlefield. The reality, however, is that without a solid grasp of the battlefield dynamics and the enemy's plans, even the most skilled warrior can find himself at a severe disadvantage. It's as if a chess player were to move their pieces without considering their opponent's strategy. One would be setting oneself up for defeat. Consider this strange fact: samurai often relied heavily on their own instincts and experience rather than on thorough reconnaissance. This is like a driver taking a road trip without checking the map or GPS. The samurai would charge into battle, trusting their reputation and skills to see them through, but without knowing what kind of forces awaited them on the other side. Many samurai battles were lost not because of lack of skill, but due to a complete misunderstanding of the enemy's capabilities and tactics. Takeda clan, known for their fierce cavalry, faced off against the Tokugawa and Nobunaga forces, who employed a new strategy involving extensive intelligence gathering and preparation. The samurai cavalry charged into a well-prepared enemy line of musketeers who had learned to effectively counter their charges. The outcome? A devastating defeat for the Takeda forces, who underestimated their opponents and failed to gather adequate intelligence beforehand. The problem here is not merely tactical, but strategic. Samurai culture placed immense value on honor and reputation, often sidelining the necessity for information gathering and intelligence. Many believed that victory was a reflection of individual skill and bravery, neglecting the importance of teamwork and strategic planning. They assumed that their name alone would intimidate the enemy and secure a swift victory, which often proved to be a naive assumption. What's even more surprising is that some samurai leaders completely dismissed the value of spies or scouts, viewing them as beneath the dignity of a warrior. In doing so, they ignored a vital aspect of warfare that could provide them with critical insights into enemy formations and tactics. This arrogance often led to their undoing, as they would engage in battles with little more than bravado and faith in their skills. An interesting fact to note is that while many samurai samurai were well versed in martial philosophy, they often failed to connect that philosophy with practical intelligence operations. They were so wrapped up in honor and the rituals of combat that they overlooked the simple yet essential act of gathering information. Imagine trying to bake a cake without knowing the recipe. You're bound to fail despite having all the ingredients. In conclusion, the samurai's neglect of intelligence gathering significantly impacted their effectiveness in battle, relying solely on strength and skill while ignoring the critical aspects of understanding the enemy's strategies led to numerous defeats throughout their history. As we move towards the final reflections of this exploration of samurai strategies, we will summarize the key lessons learned. What can we take away from these insights on the importance of intelligence in warfare, and how might they apply to our lives today? Let's explore that next. By exploring the dumb strategies samurais used, we come to an important conclusion. Even the mightiest warriors can make foolish choices. Throughout this journey, we've dissected a variety of misguided tactics, revealing that samurai culture, rich in honor and tradition, sometimes led to decisions that ultimately hindered their success in battle. Let's summarize the key points we covered. We learned about how heavy armor, which was intended for protection, often became a burden, slowing down samurais and making them easy targets for quicker opponents. And the extreme consequences of the seppuku ritual, where the pressure to maintain honor led some to choose death over surrender, causing unnecessary losses. We saw the reckless nature of charging into battle without strategy, and the folly of believing sheer bravery could overcome well-planned defenses. We also uncovered the superstition surrounding full moon battles, which often left samurai exposed and vulnerable. Ignoring the battlefield terrain proved disastrous, as did relying too heavily on honor over skills. The belief in warrior spirit often led to underestimating the enemy, while a strict adherence to the Bushido code sometimes meant blindly following orders, resulting in poor strategies. The fascination with single combat often isolated warriors instead of leveraging their group strength, and the mentality of no retreat led to unnecessary casualties. Using fireworks as distractions backfired, as did the overconfidence in ranged weapons, leaving warriors unprepared for close combat. Psychological warfare misfired when attempts to intimidate opponents only encouraged them to fight harder. We also explored how underestimating the enemy's capabilities led to surprise defeats. Avoiding alliances due to pride or the belief that collaboration was a sign of weakness often left samurai outnumbered. Sticking to tradition at the expense of innovation made them vulnerable to opponents who adapted more quickly. Neglecting training left samurai unprepared, as theory alone was insufficient for actual combat situations. Finally, dismissing the importance of intelligence gathering meant that many samurai operated without a clear understanding of their enemy, which could shift the course of battle dramatically. As we conclude, let's reflect on how these lessons from samurai strategies can apply to our lives today. The need for intelligence, adaptability, and a balanced approach to tradition and innovation is crucial, not just in warfare but in any challenge we face. Embracing the lessons learned from these historical missteps can help us avoid similar pitfalls in our own lives, whether in personal endeavors, professional growth, or decision-making processes. Now, take a moment to consider how you can apply these insights moving forward. What strategies can you implement in your own life to ensure you're prepared, informed, and adaptable? The wisdom from these samurai stories serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in understanding not just the battlefield, but also the nuances of strategy and human behavior. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the dumbest strategies samurais used in battle. If you found these insights valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.